Welcome to Rewitched, a charmed 1998 rewatch podcast. Join us on our journey as we recap, examine, and critique the series episode by episode from the beginning.
We'll be keeping our podcast spoiler free, so we welcome fans, new and old, to join us in watching and reflecting on one of our favorite shows. Currently, we're on season 2,
I'm your host, Jess Sabanko.
and I'm your host, Mia Sabenko.
Now let's get into this week's episode. This week, we're discussing Season 2, Episode 9, Ms. Hellfire. It originally aired on January 13th, 2000, following the winter hiatus, and had 5.72 million viewers.
All right, so this episode starts out in the manor. Prue, we see her walking into the dining room and she's on the phone reorganizing her schedule for the day. And Phoebe is sitting at the table and she's eating and reminds Prue that the last Tybo class is at 7. She thinks she can make it, but things just aren't working out schedule-wise. And then Prue's cell phone starts ringing and Phoebe goes to get it. She answers and it's Mr. Caldwell, the new VP, in the office about an emergency staff meeting. And her assistant and Phoebe both tell her, like, at the same time, basically, that the meeting is at 9:30, be there or be fired. Phoebe says that she needs a nap, and Prue says, well, I need another me. I don't even have time to have fun anymore. And then Piper walks in the back door, and they start teasing her a little about never seeing her anymore because she spends all her time with Dan. And Piper says that's because I can. For the first time in months, my life is nice and calm and normal. I don't even care that it's Friday. And then Phoebe shushes her and cuts her off. And Piper finishes her sentence anyways and says the 13th. See, I said it and nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, gunshots hit the table and like blow up the juice and just continue around the room like a drive-by shooting. And the sisters run and hide. And then Phoebe said, I told you not to say it. And Piper's like, oh, so this is my fault? And Piper runs over to where the other ones are. So they're all behind the couch, freezing some bullets as she goes. And then Phoebe says, since when do demons use bullets? And Piper said, maybe it's not a demon. And then Prue says, who else would want to kill us? Phoebe's like, well, you know, you were a little sharp to the mailman yesterday. We all know how testy they can be. And then they hear the front door lock click and they kind of say their little plan. Piper's like, freeze. Phoebe says, kick. And Prue's like, send flying. And then a woman in all leather with a red bob walks in from the back door with a huge gun. And they all look at her and she starts shooting at them. And then Prue uses her power to push the bullets back into her. She shot 3 times and then in the chest, and the woman drops to the floor. And they all go to the kitchen where her body is. And Prue's like, oh my God, she's not a demon.
Yeah, so really hot start with this scene.
Yeah, seriously. And they killed the human for the first time. Insane.
I know. I guess so. Starting from the beginning, I mean, we're establishing this idea that Prue is putting way too much of herself into work and it's kind of taking over her whole life. And she feels very like stressed, very this need to be in 2 places at once, right? Which is the theme that'll come up throughout the episode. We see that, you know, Piper and Dan's relationship seems to be going well from what we can tell here. Piper's very happy. And we also can see that there is this mysterious human who just came after them. And now they're going to have to deal with the consequences of that, which I'm really excited about.
Yes. We're also aware it's Friday the 13th, the big superstition day for everybody. So, yeah, there's a lot to intake in this first scene, a lot that'll kind of come up later. But so far, hot intro, and I'm loving it.
Yes. So then from there, we have the theme song. And then we come back into the manor where the woman's body is still on the kitchen floor and the sisters are going through her purse. They find passports and foreign money and throwing stars, a lipstick that when you twist it, there's like a little knife inside. They find her apartment key and it's this place called Sutro Heights, which is not too far from them. Phoebe is kind of pointing out how they've never been attacked by a mortal before, and Prue says, yeah, I never killed a mortal before either. And, Phoebe's like, Prue, you had no choice. And she says that it doesn't make it any easier. Piper's looking through a notebook and says, does it make it easier if the mortal was a hit woman? Because there's this list of names. One of them is on it. It says P. Hallowell. And then other than that, there's one name, M. Steadwell. The rest are all crossed off. And Prue realizes that someone must have hired her. So they look at another page and see that whoever hired her knew that they had powers. It says Prue, telekinesis, Piper, power to freeze, Phoebe, negligible. And Phoebe's really bothered by that, obviously. And then Piper says, well, that explains why she drove us to the front door and surprised us from behind. And Prue says, still, why would a demon hire a mortal to kill us? It doesn't make any sense. And Piper says, I just wish we knew about the part of the equation before we called. And then there's a knock at the door. Darryl walks in and Prue thanks him for coming. He says, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure I actually want to be here. Depends on whether or not you actually tell me the truth this time. And Phoebe tells him that someone tried to kill them. Darryl asks if they saw who it was. And Prue points to the kitchen and says that she's in there. Darryl's like, she? So we got a little sexist line from Darryl. We haven't heard one of those in a while.
His true character coming out.
So then Darryl goes over and he sees the body. They tell him that she started shooting and they think she's a hit woman. They were on her list. And he says, and that's why you're standing here alive and she's in here riddled with bullets. Prue says, Darryl, it was self-defense. You can check her gun if you don't believe us. The only fingerprints that you're going to find on it are hers. And he says, begs the same question. How come she's got the bullets in her body if you didn't fire the gun? Phoebe asks if he really wants to know. He says, tell me. The sisters all look at each other, and then Phoebe says, we're witches. We have powers. Piper says, and we think there's how do I put this? A demon behind this. Prue says the only way for us to find out who it is if you can keep all of this quiet for as long as possible. He asks to see the notebook, and Phoebe tells him 9 names are already crossed out. One more other than them is still uncrossed. He sees on the page that it says M. Steadwell, plastique, 10 o'clock a.m. So he says plastic explosives. For all we know, she's already got someplace rigged up, ready to blow. Prue says maybe it's someplace that M. Steadwell is supposed to be at 10. Phoebe says it's after 9 already. Darryl says that he's going to go check DMV records to find an address, and Phoebe's going to go with him. Prue and Piper are going to go to the woman's apartment after they make a quick stop at Buckland's, and Phoebe asks what they do about her. Darryl says, I can call in a favor and put the body on ice, but that's not going to buy you much time. 1 day max. And then him and Phoebe leave together.
So, first of all, the whole that I'm going through her bag and the ninja stars and the lipstick that it has a blade inside. Did you ever every time I watched this episode when I saw it, do you remember being younger and those little fake spy kits that you could get at the store that had lipstick blades in it?
Yeah.
Everything. It felt so childish to me. But I thought it was funny because I remember getting those when I was younger, the little spy kits that came with a pack of all those things that are not actually that useful. But anyways, I thought that was funny. But what do we think about Darryl finally finding out about the secret?
I know. I'm so excited. For some reason in my head, this episode comes so much earlier in the season than it actually did. I mean, it's episode 9. We're not that far in, but we are. I mean, this is after the winter break. This is almost halfway through the season, and Darryl's just now finding out. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see how this is going to change their dynamic with him throughout the rest of the show. I'm excited to see if this is going to bring them all closer or if this is going to cause some tension like it did after Andy found out. I'm really excited to see where this is going.
Me too. And I'm shocked about his reaction too. I mean, I guess it could be him being in shock, but we've been kind of leading up to this. I remember we were talking about it in other episodes how it's kind of leading up to him finding out. and wondering if that's going to happen anytime soon. And now here it is, he's finding out and had nothing to say about it.
That's what
I
I was
think it
thinking
was like,
too.
I kind of feel like in a way he knew, as much as he was denying all of that for so long and denying believing in any of those things. I think a part of him kind of knew already, and once they said it, it was just kind of like confirmed, and it almost seems like he wants to pretend it's just not there. Doesn't want to think about it, doesn't want to talk about it, like doesn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of thinking too, and I'm kind of questioning a little bit. Like it did feel a little anticlimactic to me that like he
Yeah.
barely has a reaction at all when he finds out. And I'm interested in watching his behavior throughout the episode. I mean, I don't want to get into things because I feel like I'll have things to say later as his lines come up, but it's clear that he's not interested in knowing too much. Like here at the beginning, he's like, tell me the truth, tell me the truth. And then all of a sudden, he wants to go back to his need to know basis. So I see kind of a regression happening later in the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll definitely get more into that because I see the same thing as more of his lines continue and we see more of that. But as of now, you can kind of get that vibe based on his very small reaction that it's just he wishes he could go back and not know.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what it seems like to me.
But I like how even though he like, probably there is a little bit of disbelief, like his still gut reaction is just to help, right? He's like, well, we could get somebody to do something with the body. We'll find out what this M. Steadwell thing is. Like, we're going to work on this and I'm here for you, basically.
Yeah. It's kind of wild the strings that he can pull as the cop. It kind of, I mean, it's good, it's helpful for them, but it's like it makes you wonder, like, do people really do this? Like, if you're really good friends with a cop or something, are they able to kind of cover things up the way that he kind of can for the sisters? Like,
Yeah, and it's also making me wonder because I know we talked a little bit about this in season 1 back when we were talking about Darryl and Andy's partnership, but I'm wondering exactly how high up in the ranks like Darryl kind of is because we always got the impression that he was a little bit higher up than Andy and had like more experience at least working in San Francisco. So I'm kind of wondering how high up he is, how respected he is by his coworkers, like that type of thing. That's giving him the ability to kind of cover for the sisters and how as he continues to do it that may or may not change throughout the series.
right. Yeah, no, I'm definitely wondering the same thing. And also the little sexist comment from Darryl.
Yeah, I had to
I mean,
point
I
it out.
guess
I couldn't let it go.
it wasn't like super sexist or anything, but he was like she like yeah, a woman could be an assassin. Fuck you.
Didn't you
Yeah,
think the
that was funny.
sisters were possibly working for the CIA at one point so they could work for the CIA but they can't be the killer?
Yeah, exactly. Also, I'm wondering once it kind of comes out, like after this woman is done being covered up, because like he said, it buy you a day, 1 day max, and then he's got to probably take legal actions like you normally would when you find a body. How did the girls get out of that? I mean, I guess technically they never touched her and they never touched the gun. But I'm just wondering how Darryl is going to cover. Where is he going to say he found the body? How is that going to play out? But we never find out about that side of things.
Yeah,
We never
I
find
didn't
out
even
about the
think about
aftermath.
that. Because,
Yeah.
like, a lot of times, it's a demon, so, like, the body might disappear or it was not at the manor, but this body was literally at the manor. This is now the second dead body there, right? Because we had
Yeah.
Andy died there last season, and now this chick died there this season. Like, there's just a pile of bodies connected to the Hallowells now. It's not even like their names are just popping up in cases. Like, there are literally
Yeah.
people dying in their home.
Exactly. So it definitely, you would think it would come up as a little suspicious. So, I mean, I'm wondering if one day it's going to kind of fall back on them, or if the show is just going to continue to like leave it in the blue, and that thing where shows just doesn't really make sense, but they do it, for
Yeah,
for
that thing we
storyline.
call in film and television suspension of disbelief, right? We have to forget that it's not realistic for the sake of the story.
Exactly. I like that. But so I'm wondering if that's ever going to come back on them, or if it's just going to be one of those things, because I'm sure this won't be the last time something like this happens, where humans, mortals, end up dying around the Hallowells. I mean, being that they're involved with the demons all the time. So we'll see what happens with that. But another thing I'm curious about and excited to see is where this whole assassin came from. What's her deal? Why is she after the Hallowells? Why is she after a list of people? And they're all dead, obviously, because they're crossed off, except for Miss M. Studwell.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm excited to find out more about that.
Me too.
So now we are at Buckland's, and Mr. Caldwell is walking around the table speaking. He says, as the new regional VP of Buckland's auction houses, I'll be implementing a new course of action for a new millennium. The problem is I don't know you well enough to know who's worth keeping and who's not. And that's when Prue kind of sneaks in and sits down next to Jack. And he tells her, "You're late, partner." She's like, "We're not partners." And he's like, "You want to bet?" And then Mr. Caldwell calls her out for being late and asks her name. And he tells her that she'll be partnered with Jack. And then Piper is trying to get her attention from outside the room. And Mr. Caldwell is saying that every employee in this room and their partner has until tomorrow night to scour through the obits, do whatever you have to do to raise $100,000 of auction material. Prue raises her hand and she's like, "By tomorrow?" He says, "If you want to keep your job, welcome to the new Bucklands." And then the meeting ends. And Jack says, "Whoa, guess we better clear the decks, huh?" And Piper is still trying to get her attention. And Jack says, "Prue, we might even have to work over dinner." She's trying to say no, and he asks if they're in it together. And Piper's stomping her feet at her. So Prue is kind of stuck back and forth. And then suddenly Prue splits in two and appears next to Piper, just another Prue by Piper. And her sleeping self is still next to Jack. And then Prue is confused and Piper looks pretty shocked too. And then she goes back into herself and wakes up. Piper looks over at her and Jack asks if she even heard a word he said. And she says no. And then she says she's feeling a little weird and gets up to leave. And she goes over to Piper and she's like, "What the hell just happened?" She's like, "I don't know. I think it was some sort of astral projection." Piper's like, "How did you do it?" She says, "I don't know. I just felt this sort of desperate need for there to be two of me. And all of a sudden there was." And then Piper says, "Do you think this is part of your powers growing?" She says, "Maybe. I mean, if I can move things with my mind, why not my body?" And then she says, "Let's just get out of here before it happens again." And the two of them leave.
All right. So a couple things with this scene.
Yeah.
My first question is, he's like, as the new regional VP of Buckland's auction houses, there are multiple auction houses? I never knew that before. I always thought it was one place.
Me too. It must be a big company. I didn't think about it either.
And then that makes me have so many more questions about last season with Rex and Hannah and everything, right? Because Rex took over the identity of the owner of Buckland's son or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're supposed to just believe that there are multiple auction houses all of a sudden. It just feels like a lack of continuity to me that makes no sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work with the whole Rex and Hannah story. I wonder.
The one reason it might work, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because remember a few episodes ago, they were talking about some type of acquisition. So maybe another company bought it and now Buckland's is one of many auction houses that they own. But they're making it seem like Buckland's is the chain as opposed to they bought Buckland's as part of another chain, which is what made it confusing to me. Because if a bigger company bought them, I could totally buy that as what happened, but not that there were already multiple Bucklands. That makes no sense.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way unless they bought it. But the way that they're saying Buckland's auction houses, yeah, it doesn't sound like another company bought it. You're right. It's just a lack of continuity.
Yeah.
Another thing is, I mean, is that normal? I feel like also for Prue to be the only one to question it, the $100,000 by tomorrow. I mean, no one would ever ask you to do something like that. Each individual person or each partner, like out of that whole group, has to have $100,000. And with oh crap, what was her name?
With Claire.
Claire, yes. With Claire,
When the same thing, she was like, plan an auction by tomorrow.
Yeah, plan it by tomorrow, and we need to sell $2 million worth of inventory. Like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make how could you ever ask somebody to do that? It's so unrealistic. Like, he could have said like maybe 50,000 even would have been better, but like $100,000 for all this. I don't know. I feel like there's always just these unrealistic expectations that
No, there
Prue's
are, because
job.
it's like, I could see if it was like, oh, you have 2 weeks, you have 30 days to find this,
Exactly.
and that. But like, by tomorrow, be so serious. That's not going to happen.
I know. If you want to keep your job, like everybody's getting fired. Like,
yeah, they're just doing mass layoffs.
I know. Like, it doesn't even work like that. There's no way that it's not even feasible, I don't know. It's just a bit ridiculous to me. But another thing, I didn't realize how big of an episode this was. I mean, we've got Prue discovering a new power and Darryl finding out about the secret. I mean, things are getting pretty wild here. Like, I didn't realize this was going to be so much happening, And Prue's new power, I mean, I really like the way they have it still kind of connected to her original power. Like she moves things with her mind so she can move her body with her mind. Like, it kind of makes sense. Like, I like that they keep it consistent like that kind of thing. I thought that was pretty cool. But another thing I'm wondering about their powers growing is, I mean, Melinda Warren, she only had those 3 original powers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And isn't it like a known thing that every witch kind of had those powers throughout their line?
Yeah, part of me wonders, because I think the same thing, because we even noticed with like Grams and with Patty, like they both only had one power. Like they had really strong versions of their power, but they only had one. So I'm wondering if the sisters get multiple powers, or I mean, at least so far Prue has, because they're the charmed ones. That's what I'm wondering.
I was thinking the same thing. Like, that could be, since they're the ones that are like the end of the line, or not end of the line, but that's what they said, right? That's what,
like, it all culminates into this really
curse.
strong, most powerful group of sisters.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's probably what it is. So I guess it's not that, weird, but pretty exciting in general.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to what you were saying about the connection between, her telekinesis and this power of astral projection, I feel like it's one of those things that when I was younger watching the show, I never saw the connection. I always thought it was just like random.
Mm-hmm.
And we could talk about this. I mean, not to get too much into spoilers, but the other sisters are eventually going to get new powers as well. So we could talk about the connections between powers as they continue to develop those new powers and like whether or not we can see them clearly. But I do see it for Prue. I do see the connection here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll see in the future with more as the other sisters develop. We'll definitely be able to talk about that more. But I get what you're saying. And I see it too.
So then we're in Darryl's car, and Darryl and Phoebe are kind of driving down the road together, and the sirens are on. And Phoebe's like, hey, you can ask me anything you want about being a witch. And he's like, no, thanks. She's like, it's actually really good. We have this book. It's called The Book of Shadows. And he's like, too much information, Phoebe. She's like, no, but it's this. And he's like, nothing I want to know about. I'm serious. I don't want to know anything. She's like, come on. You don't even want to know if we can like fly or anything like that. He's like, I don't want to know if you own a broom, a skillet, a cauldron, a dustbuster. I don't give a damn. And he honks the horn and then makes this really sharp turn. He's like, Phoebe, I stare down death every day, but I'm trained to handle it. And that's in this world. I don't know if I want to be dragged into another one. She says, I think it's too late, Darryl, but we won't let anything happen to you, I promise. And she asks if he's sure it's the right address, and he says it's the only M. Steadwell registered.
So here we see more of that Darryl wanting to have nothing to do with this. And I kind of like, as he explained his reasoning, I see it, like it makes sense. It was, yeah, it's a shock, but now his reaction makes a little more sense. He's just not prepared to be dragged into another world, especially another world of death, like he already has to deal with that every single day in the real world, the human world. So I'm sure this idea of like demons and magic and stuff that he can't handle, he can't deal with those things, like he can't protect people the way that the sisters can from those things. So it's hard for him to want to be involved with it.
Yeah, totally. Like I do see his point of view here. We can continue to talk about it as he keeps, being part of the episode, because I feel like I'll have a lot to say in his last scene of the episode. But just to talk about Phoebe in this scene a little bit, I think it's so adorable the way that she's so clearly excited to talk to someone who isn't her sisters about the world of magic, and Darryl is just not about it, and you could just tell how like disappointed she is because she's trying to like have this conversation and share with somebody because she finally can talk about it, and then for him to just be like, no, I don't want to know anything, I don't give a damn, like that must be so hard for her.
I know. She's like over here desperate to finally have someone that she can talk to about it. And she was so excited. And I felt kind of bad that she couldn't just let it out. But also, I was surprised about her admitting the book is shadows. I feel like that's their biggest, like, hush hush kind of thing. But, it's Darryl. So
Yeah,
I
because
felt
I
bad for
even
her too.
remember, I'm pretty sure when Andy found out they were witches, Phoebe was the one who was like, oh, should we tell him about the book?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's why I was a little confused that she was so ready to open up to Darryl about it. But then again, as time went on, she knows that he's trustworthy, and she's kind of probably really on the edge of her seat here to finally have someone to talk to. Like at first, she probably was fine just keeping it between her and her sisters, and now she's like, okay, like I'm over this. I need to let it out.
Mm-hmm.
Now we see in the street a woman with bags in an orange outfit is walking down the street. She's about to put her key into a door and open up a building. And Phoebe and Darryl pull up as that's happening. Darryl yells no to her and don't and tackles her as the door opens and the store blows up. And they're both okay. They didn't get hit with the explosion. And then Phoebe approaches M. Steadwell and she's like, it worked. I can't believe it. I cast a protection spell and it actually worked. My first spell. And she's like laughing all excited. And Daryl's like, oh no, don't tell me she's a witch too.
So this is a cute, interesting scene. Just like Darryl's protectiveness and everything, I really admire him jumping, like he said, right into the line of danger, like he was talking about in the previous scene, to protect this woman. And then we have her, so excited about this spell that she cast. And now we know the connection of the list, right? At least M. Steadwell is also a witch, like the sisters.
Exactly. Now the list is starting to make a little more sense, Obviously, it's got something to do with witches. We're still not exactly sure why, but yeah, I thought it was a cute little thing too. And Daryl's reaction, like, oh, don't tell me she's a witch too. I thought it was funny.
So then we're at an apartment building, and Piper and Prue are coming out of the elevator. They see that the place is full of really expensive stuff. Piper's going to go look in the kitchen. Prue's going to go look in the bedroom. And she's really impressed, and then goes into the closet and starts touching all of this woman's clothes and stuff. In the kitchen, Piper sees that the fridge and the cabinets are all empty. Back in the closet, Prue finds a bunch of wigs and jewelry and all types of stuff. Piper sees like a little pile of mail and starts going through it and sees that it's addressed to current resident. In the bedroom, Prue is trying on a jacket and like this leather outfit, and she's spinning in front of the mirror. Piper walks in and she's like, she must not have lived here long. All the mail is marked resident. Were you twirling? And Prue's like, no, but opportunity knocked and I did answer. Check out this wardrobe. And Piper's kind of like telling her to focus. She's like, I can't. It's not just the clothes, wigs, makeup kits, prosthetics, enhancements. Piper says, I wonder if anybody knew what she really looked like. Prue says she doubts it. And Piper says, if it weren't for the roses, we wouldn't even know what to call her. They're addressed to Ms. Hellfire.
Loving it. Love the name.
Me
So
too.
intense, you know?
Honestly,
Really
that's what
draws
I
you
want
in.
my little nickname to be, Ms. Hellfire. Badass.
I know, it's so badass. I want someone to call me that. Also, Prue in the closet with all those clothes. I would be doing the exact same thing. I mean, I would have snuck an earring or two, you know? Like maybe a necklace. Like she's got all this stuff. The woman's dead. She's not going to be needing it. Like I would snag one probably. I wouldn't be able to resist, especially that wardrobe. Are you kidding me?
And I feel like it's one of those things that like very much fits her character because I think we've seen throughout the show like Phoebe and Prue especially like do have this obsession with like clothes and bags and all that type of thing. So it definitely makes sense that she's sitting there trying on the woman's clothes.
Yeah. And of course Piper being her she's always, you know, the more focused one on these things or more fearful, so she kind of wants to get to the bottom of it more. That's what she's focused on, and it fits her character too, to be over there like Prue. Can you stop?
Yeah. And I also just love this idea of this woman who like has no identity, has no connections. Like it's really interesting to me. Because again, you know, the show kind of brought it up earlier when Darryl was like because like it's not typically women that we see in this position. So I like that play on the hitman role that the show does.
Me too. And I've always been curious about like how people end up in a position like that, you know?
Mhm.
To just have no identity and like this crazy combat training basically and all those things. Like I wonder what's the history behind that, you know? It's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, it is. And it literally reminds me of a movie I watched the other day. I don't know if you've heard of it. It came out either last year or in 2021. And it's called Nobody. And it's about this guy who is like basically a government sanctioned hitman. And it's all about how like his identity was hidden and like all this stuff. And like all his files were super confidential and everyone was terrified of him. And he like takes out the entire Russian mob by himself because, you know, it's an action movie. But like it reminded me a lot of what's going on here with Miss Hellfire and kind of the way they establish hitmans in television and in movies as kind of these people with no connections. And I mean, not that I know much about like hitmen and hit women in real life, but it's a really interesting concept that I feel like comes up in pop culture over and over again.
Yeah. There's tons of movies about it. I haven't seen that one, but I've heard of or seen similar things where there are like assassins like this and hitmen and hit women, and it always makes you wonder, you know?
So then they're still in the apartment, but now they've moved over to the living room. And Prue's looking at the roses, and the card says, Ms. Hellfire, until we meet at last, Bane. Then the elevator opens, and three men with guns are there waiting. There's one with a ponytail, and he's kind of like the leader because he's the one who's talking. He says, don't move, don't even flinch, or you're dead. Now slowly turn around. Watch her hand. She can kill you with them in a second. Miss Hellfire, I presume? She says, are you Bane? He says, I'm his right hand man, DJ. And the other two walk closer to her. He says, Bane is very unhappy with you. He'd like to see you now. Piper kind of comes out from behind the wall and she freezes the room, and Piper starts to leave and she's kind of expecting Prue to follow her. And Prue says, you know, they think I'm Hellfire. And Piper's like, so? She's like, so maybe I should go with them. I mean, maybe the best way to find out who hired her is to pretend to be her. I mean, you said it yourself. Nobody knows what she looks like, certainly not this Bane guy. She says, well, Prue, somebody might know what she looks like. Prue says she can protect herself and that she has something they don't have, something guns can't even compete with. And Piper's like, today may not be the best day to boast about your powers. And Prue says that the demon is eventually going to figure out that P. Hallowell is still alive and send someone else, so they need to do something. So they go back to their positions, and Piper says, is it just me, or are you a little too eager to play this role? And Prue says it's not a bad role to play. So Piper unfreezes them, and, the guy says, are you going to make this easy or not? And she says, put that thing away before you hurt yourself. And then she walks over to the elevator as the men follow, and Piper watches them all walk out, and we can tell that she's kind of worried about Prue.
So I'm kind of loving this idea of Prue taking her identity. I mean, yeah, it may be dangerous, but this badass role, like, it suits Prue. Like, she can handle it. And the way that, like, she knows how to talk to them, she knows how to be confident, and that's really what you need to have. I feel like that's what this hit woman would be like. So I don't know, I kind of love it.
Yeah, there's something I'm starting to notice develop in Prue's character. And, like, it's not an insult in any way, but there is this sort of, like, overconfidence to her that comes up sometimes. And I'm interested to see how that'll continue throughout the show and kind of the effects it'll have on her and her relationships with her sisters, because it's not the first time we're seeing her kind of making a decision that is a little rash. I mean, we're going to see it play out well in this episode, spoiler to the end of the episode, but sometimes Prue does jump into things because she just thinks she can handle it. A lot of the time she ends up being right, but I worry that at some point she might not be, and that she should sometimes take her sister's worries and fears into account before she acts.
I definitely agree with that. I've noticed that about her too. And I mean, I assume part of it comes from that instinct to take care of her sisters and protect them, being that she was the one who basically raised them, and helped raise them. So I think it kind of made her develop this ego a little bit. Not that it's like totally unwarranted. I mean, Prue really is a badass. She can handle her shit. But like you said, there are some scenarios where she should take her sister's thoughts and worries and before she decides things, because she would expect that from them. She would expect that they'd tell her before doing anything, basically, when it involves magic. And it also brings me back to when Andy first died and they were struggling with the demon. I think it was, what was it, during the equinox? Abraxas, yeah. And she was crying downstairs like, why is everything always on me? Like, I'm supposed to be the strong one, this, blah, blah, blah. Why couldn't I save Andy if all of that. And it's like, it almost sounds like part of her doesn't want to do that, but I think she does it unintentionally. Makes herself kind of the mom.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, puts everything on herself and then gets overwhelmed about it every now and then, but she's kind of the one doing it.
Yeah, I also will say, I agree with Piper. Like, Prue does seem a little bit eager to play this role. And I think it's because no matter what Ms. Hellfire is, like, her life is something Prue's isn't. And that's that she makes all the decisions, right? And it's fun, it's exciting. It's not the same stress of like, hey, you have to raise $200,000 by tomorrow.
Right. She doesn't have to be this like officey put together kind of person. She gets to fill that excitement void in her life.
Yeah, exactly. Because she even said earlier in the episode, I never get to have fun anymore. Now, will this be too much fun? We'll find out.
Yeah. Oh boy. So now we are at this Bane character's house, and Bane, we see him sitting on a couch, and three men are standing around him, and some guy is telling him he tried to get the money for him, and Bane's like, you lied to me. Very like Godfather like with this like you lied to me. I don't know. I thought it was funny. And then the guy keeps going on, and Bane's like, you made a mistake and you're sorry for it, right? And then he notices the other men and Prue walking in together, and he kind of like loses track of this guy and is like, well, lesson learned, all right? Just never lie to me again, understood? And then the guy thanks him and leaves, and Bane gets up and walks towards them, and he says, wow, you are more beautiful than I imagined. And Prue says, so we finally meet. And he says, did you like the roses? Prue says, I would have preferred orchids. And he's like, beautiful and honest. And then he smiles at her and says, like, let's take a walk. So they start walking up the stairs together, and he's like, what do I call you? She's like, what you always call me. He's like, well, Miss Hellfire seems so cold in person, unless your emails to me have been a tease. And then she takes off her jacket, and she's like, I think you know me better than that, and sits down. He says, do I? You didn't confirm the Hallowells this morning. She says that she didn't have a clean shot, and he's like, well, that's disappointing. What about the last one on the list? She's like, Steadwell, it was a blast. And he says, I like your style, I always have. The problem is you still got the Hallowells, but you got until midnight to take them out. And DJ brings them some champagne, and she says, don't worry about the Hallowells, I know their every move. And he says, I'm getting a lot of pressure, you know. She's like, from who? He's like, you know. And she's like, of course, pretending like she knows what he's talking about. And then her phone rings, and it's Jack, and he asked what happened to her this morning, and she's telling him that she's with a client, and he says, well, it better be a rich client, time is money. And then Bane offers her the glass of champagne and smiles, and Jack's like, champagne at this hour, where are you? And Bane says, to us. And Jack's like, hey Prue, you know me, I'm all for having a good time, but we're under some serious pressure here. And then she's like, yeah, I know, and has this feeling where she needs to be in two places at once again, and ends up astral projecting to the office not in front of, but outside of Jack's office, her office. And then she astral projects out just in time before Jack sees her and goes back into her body. And Bane's like, are you all right? What happened? And Jack's like, Prue, what the hell's going on? And Prue just is like, I'll call you back, and hangs up the phone. And then Bane looks at DJ and he shrugs, and then at Prue. And Prue's like, sorry, and he takes the glass. And then he says that she better hold off on this until the job is completed. She says, I guess I better be going, and gets up. And then he does too and grabs her arm. And he says, you're not going anywhere, not without my driving you. And then he smiles at her. And she grabs her coat and walks towards the stairs. And he tells DJ, tell him I'm on it. And then DJ's like, hey man, why me? I don't even know the guy. And he's like, you will, just go in my office, he'll show. And then Bane leaves.
So first thing to say here, Bane, aka Antonio Sabato Jr.,
Love of my
so
life.
fucking hot.
Oh my god. Love of my life.
Every time he smiles, my heart just beats so fast I can't breathe. Like
I know.
I
Blush
am
just
in
watching
love.
him on TV. This man is
And like everything
so
about
hot.
his behavior, like the money, the charm, like he has it all. I'm like, ooh, Bane, okay.
Yeah, like that's my guy. He's everything about him. He's so badass too in this show.
I
I
know.
mean, he's the bad guy technically, or one of them, but I absolutely love his character.
Yes. And like, you know, I'm excited to talk more about him as we see him in more scenes, and kind of at the end of the episode, I'll make my final judgment on whether I think he's truly a villain or not.
Me
We're
too. Yeah.
introduced to him as this kind of like mob boss type of guy, and then but we do see that he's not completely evil, right? I mean, even this guy who like lied to him, like, yeah, he puts some scare into him, but then he just lets him go. So we do see that there is something compassionate within Bane, and we see it in the romance too, of the way he is with Prue thinking she's Hellfire. So I'm excited
Right.
to talk about this kind of dual side to him, where he is this kind of like villain, but he also has these charming, sweet side to him, which makes me wonder, like, is he a bad guy who's just like charismatic, or is there a good side to him? That's something I'm interested in talking more about as the episode goes on.
Me too, 100%. And at the end of the episode, I will also make my final judgment on him.
Cool. So with the whole Prue and Jack aspect of this scene, I do feel bad for Jack because it's so clear that like he just wants to like work with Prue, get what they need to get done. And like in his head, she's just blowing him off, right? And he's about to lose his job because of this. So I do
Yeah.
understand like his stress and kind of how he's feeling. And I like the way that like Bane probably hearing her on the phone where she's like, oh, I'm with a client, probably assumes it's a personal call, right? So that's why he's like, oh, to us, like trying to like make whoever it is she's talking to jealous. Like I like the way there's that aspect of the scene as well.
Yeah. I like the way that they set it up, and the fact Jack hearing it, not only does he think that she's blowing him off and making him lose his job, but also that she's blowing him off for a date, you know?
Yeah,
And we
exactly.
already know that Jack does have some interest in Prue, so it's definitely I definitely get his frustration here. I mean, I'd be screaming on the phone, you know? I'd be
Yeah.
like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" If I was him, you know?
I'm
Uh,
trying to remember because, like, since, I've been watching the episodes and everything, have Prue and Jack gone on a date yet? Did they go on a date last episode?
so I'm pretty sure it was super weird. Like she was like, maybe I should buy you a drink then like bought him a drink, or I'll make it up to you with dinner, and maybe they did that, but they never showed it, and it kind of sounds like nothing ever came of it, and they're still in this like weird phase of uh, like I kind of hate you. Like, you know what
Yeah,
I
because
mean?
that's what I was thinking too. Because I was like, I'm pretty sure they did go on a date, either last episode or the episode before. So I'm like, is this like, I mean, if they went on one date, I guess not. But I'm like, is he like, oh, Prue's like dating other people? Like, I want to be with Prue, but maybe she doesn't like me back. Like, is that what's going on here too?
Right. I'm very confused about their whole situation right now.
So then from there, we go into Bane's office and we see DJ walk in and close the door. He sits on the desk, and as he's sitting there, the demon of fear appears behind him in a smoky effect. And he's like looking for me. And DJ's like, where the hell did you come from? And he says, you really don't want to know. Trust me. Why aren't the witches dead? And DJ's confused by this. He's like, witches? And the demon's like, answer me. He says, how'd you know they weren't dead? He says, one developed, say, and then he kind of like sniffs the air and says, sixth sense about such things when you've been in purgatory as long as I have. Never mind. I made a deal. It gives me a 24-hour window to break free. But now, you people, you got to kill those witches if I'm going to be successful. And he asks again who he is. He says a demon who has the power to turn innermost fears of a mortal into reality. And there's nothing you can do about it. Want to see? And then he wipes his hand in front of DJ's face. It says, your greatest fear is that your boss is being double crossed. And when he finds out, he's going to kill you for not protecting him. And then the door bursts open and Bane has a huge gun and he starts shooting at DJ. And DJ like falls to the ground in pain, but we can see that he wasn't actually shot. And the demon's watching this. And then Bane vanishes in the same smoky effect that the demon appeared in. And DJ looks down at his chest and sees that there's no bullets, wounds, or anything. And then the demon leans in close to him and says, pretty cool, huh? And DJ just looks totally freaked out.
So our boy is back. I love it. We talked about this last season, how he is our favorite demon because of his attitude, the way he presents himself, the way he acts everything. Like, I love it. And the fact that he's reoccurring just makes my heart melt. The show knew what they were doing here.
They did. They really did. Like, if they were going to pick one season one villain to come back, I'm so glad it was the Demon of Fear. Like,
Me too.
I'm so happy to see him. Like, I love everything about him. Like you're saying, I mean, it's in a different way because he's a different kind of character, but he's just like the attitude is just so
On point. Like no one's
yes.
ever played the part quite like he does, you know? I don't know what it is about him, but he's got this natural like flow to him that makes him sound so like the acting is just perfect, you know?
Yeah, like he's terrifying in the best possible way. That's the only way I can think to describe it.
Yeah, exactly. And it just makes my heart so happy.
Yes.
So now we are back at the manor, and Piper is in the conservatory with Dan, and he's measuring the windows and telling her he can have his crew install temporary ones, and she thanks him. And then he notices the phone in her hand and asks if she's waiting for a call. She says that she is from Prue, she's worried about her. And Dan says, I wouldn't blame you after what happened. What makes you think it was a drive-by? And she says, just a wild guess. And then he says, I want you to move in with me, at least until the permanent windows are installed. If it's your sisters you're worried about, they can move in too. Since Jenny moved back with her folks, there's just plenty of room. And then she says, I don't know if that's such a great idea. Some of us don't wear pajamas. And she laughs. And Dan says, I'm serious. Because if things worked out, maybe you could stay permanently if you wanted to. And then the front door opens and it's Phoebe and Steadwell. And Phoebe says, Piper, and she says, in here. Then to Dan, I don't know what to say. And then Dan says, say you'll think about it. And Steadwell says, oh, is he, and Piper freezes her and Dan. And she asks who she is. And Phoebe tells her that that's M. Steadwell. And he's like, and she's like, how's Dan? Piper tells her that he just asked her to move in with him. And then asks where Morris is. And then she says, he's at the morgue putting the hit woman's body under Marcy's name. Where's Prue? And then Piper says, way overdue. She's assuming the identity of the hit woman. And guess what? She's got a new power. She can astral project now. And Phoebe's like, are you kidding me? I hate her. And Piper's like, I know. All right. I'm going to send Dan home. You keep Marcy in the house until this is all over. And then she says, yeah, all right, then we'll talk. And then Phoebe goes back by Marcy.
So I guess let's start with the Dan and Piper of it all. It is way too soon for him to be asking her to move in.
Yeah, I know. Dan is like such a lover boy. Like it's
Yeah.
so weird. But I was thinking the same thing. They've only been on a couple dates, right? Like I get it, they spend a lot of time together, and I mean, you already live next door to each other. Isn't that like good enough for now? Like I can't imagine it's been more than like a month or two, you know?
I was thinking like 2-3 months they've probably
Yeah,
been dating. Yeah.
like at best. So it's not like it's a bit much, I think, but you know, to each
Then
their
again,
own.
I mean, one of my friends, I won't name names. I know they don't listen to this podcast, but I know that she is moving in with her boyfriend and they've been dating for about 2 or 3 months. She's also convinced they're gonna get married and they're the perfect couple, but I'm like, give it time.
Oh my God. Yeah, please.
I'm like,
Still in
come
that
on, two
honeymoon
months in, you're
phase.
still in the honeymoon phase. You can't.
Yeah, you don't accurately gauge each other only 2 months in. But I mean, that's kind of what happened with my mom and her boyfriend. I mean, they moved in super quick. Like, I think it was maybe a month of them dating, honestly. But hey, now they have a baby together. So,
I mean, I'm not saying it never works, but it's a
but
little
yeah,
soon in the
it's a
grand
bit,
scheme of things.
especially knowing, I feel like a big, or at least a part of why Dan is so kind of pushy with Piper or really wants this is because he really does like her, and I think he's still concerned that Leo's a factor.
Mhm.
So I think
Which
he's a
is
little concerned
also,
that he's gonna lose her.
yeah, but that's also for me what like makes it weird that he's trying to rush into something super serious because like she just got out of something with Leo. So like if I was in that position, I would be like so afraid that like I'm her rebound. And like maybe that's why he's pushing to make it more serious and have her move in. But to me, it feels like like, give her the time she needs to, like, get to where you're at if you do want things to work out with her.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. She needs to take that time. But I think Dan also is just like, it's weird, like when your emotions are taking over like that and you're concerned, it's hard to control and think rationally.
That's true.
So
Like,
it
we're
could
thinking
be,
of this from the logical outside perspective because I know myself, like, if I really like someone, like, and someone asked me to move in after 2 months, I might say yes. Like, who am I to say, like, this is the wrong thing to do or whatever? But
I know you're over here like my friend. They think that they're meant to be together. You think that like a week into meeting a guy.
yeah, but I don't like, I don't move in with them.
Yeah. Luckily you haven't done that. You haven't gotten that far yet.
So as far as the Phoebe and Steadwell stuff goes, I mean, it's really just pushing the plot forward. Of course, we get this idea that Marcy has no desire to like hide that she's a witch or anything, and
Yeah.
there's the fear that she's going to expose them to Dan and maybe other characters as the episode goes on. So there's that element of it as well. And of
It's a
course, we're
little
seeing here that she's not a real witch like them because she did freeze.
right, exactly. So I guess more of a practitioner.
Mhm.
You wouldn't think that that would count as like a real witch, that Barbas could use to kill and gain and come back or whatever his plan is.
Yeah, because then why wouldn't he just kill those types of witches? Because they don't have powers and would be
It'd be
much
so much
easier for
easier.
him to get rid of.
Exactly. So it's a little weird to me, but I mean, I guess it is what it is. Also, super weird that like who just walks into a room and it's like, oh, is he a warlock or a witch or whatever the hell she was gonna say? Like, what?
Yeah.
She just walked in and like open fire said that. Like, why did you just
Well, because
like
I
where did
guess
that
for
come
her,
from?
like being a witch is her whole personality. So she's not hiding it at all, right? So she doesn't really get where the sisters are probably coming from in this, like, oh, like we keep our witch life separate from our real life.
Right, but what I'm saying is, why was her first thought when she walked in a room, this guy's a witch?
Oh, yeah, not, oh, hi, I'm Marcy. What's your name?
Yeah,
It's,
like not
is he
like,
a
oh
witch?
hi. No, exactly. Oh hi, nice to meet you. I'm Marcy. It was none of that. It was just walked in the room. Oh, is he a witch? Like it doesn't make any that's not how it actually would have gone, I feel like.
That's not how conversations work.
Yeah. And she didn't even question Piper, like skipped past Piper and was like, I don't know who the like she doesn't know anything about Piper either. And
Maybe
just
she
walked
just
in and
wanted
was
to
like
get with Dan. She was like, he's hot. Is he a witch?
imagine like they unfreeze her and the rest of that sentence was like, oh, is he single? Because he is hot as hell. Like like it has nothing to do with what they're all worried about. Like, I don't know. It's just not how conversations go. It's just funny to me.
So then we're back at Hellfire's apartment, and Bane and Prue enter from the elevator, and she's thanking him for the ride, and then notices there are orchids on the table and all around the room. And oh my God. And he smiles and he's like, you said you preferred orchids. And she says she's impressed. He says, I'm glad. Now close your eyes. Trust me. So she does. And he pulls out a jewelry box and he's like, all right, open them and open this when I leave, okay? And remember, 3 Hallowells by midnight. On second thought, make it by 10. It gives me more time to take care of it myself in case you fail. And then he kisses her and leaves, and Prue opens the necklace and looks at it and then sighs.
So I really like I mean, I know Bane at the moment is technically the villain, but like you said, he's got this romantic side of him, and I'm kind of liking the energy between the two of them. Like it's
There
working
is
for me.
something with him and Prue that I'm seeing here, and I like it. And
Yeah.
I feel weird that I'm more drawn to this than I am to Prue and Jack, which I think is the couple that the show wants us to want together.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we could think about this in one of two ways, because I think based off of what we're seeing of Bane, you could read him as this nice romantic guy, which is how I want to see him, right? But
Right.
there's also this idea that he could be kind of like this narcissist who's doing all this for her just to win her over, because we know that he's a villain in some way.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, is he just kind of like love bombing her by giving her all these gifts and like doing all this in the beginning just so he can win her over and kind of have her as a possession too?
Right. Yeah, that's a different way of looking at it. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I mean, you're right. He kind of has everything. Like, it could be that he just wants to have her so that he can, kind of thing, you know?
Mhm. And like,
So I get that.
because I love this actor so much, I'm like, I want him to be a good guy, right? And this just to be super romantic. But like the cynical part of me is like, I'm watching you, Bane.
Yeah, right. You got to be realistic about it. I mean, yeah, we love the actor, but at the end of the day, we're talking about the character, you know?
Mhm.
So that's what we kind of have to focus on more, unfortunately.
Because part of me is like, I'd love someone to find out I like a flower and just fill a room with them. But at the same time, I'm like, that's kind of a little much.
Yeah, that's overkill. I wouldn't know what to do with all that. I'd kind of be annoyed about it, honestly. Be like, what the fuck did you give me 75 orchids for? What am I gonna do with these?
Also, now I have to keep a bunch of plants alive. That's like,
That's so much. I got people to kill. I'm like,
I'm a busy woman. I'm out here committing mass murder. Come
yeah,
on.
like I'm a full-on assassin and you want me to take care of these damn plants? It's kind of funny. So now we are at the medical examiner's office, and DJ walks in with the demon of fear, and the coroner tells him he can't like be here, he can't come in, and then he pushes him down onto the table, and he's like, "What do you want?" And the demon of fear says, "Why, your greatest fear, of course." Um, and then he says that it's being autopsied himself. And then the saw thing kind of starts buzzing and floating in the air, and he screams, and it like goes down, autopsies him, obviously. And then later, DJ opens one of the drawers, and Hellfire's body is in there. And the demon says, "It doesn't look like much of an explosion victim to me." And then DJ shakes his head, mad, and he says, "I think your fears of a double cross are justified." I was gonna say there's not too much here, except now they know, obviously, Prue is not the real Miss Hellfire.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we're back at the manor and it's nighttime now. Marcy's in the kitchen and she's like going through all their cabinets. She is not a very like nice guest. And she's like, "Oh, my stars." And Piper and Phoebe run in. They're like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "You can't keep Wolfsbane and Holy Thistle on the same shelf. Their harmonics are in complete opposition. I mean, I don't want to second guess a sister witch, but this is all wrong. I don't see how you can cast a spell that's worth a darn." And Piper's like, "Now wait just a minute, Missy." And then they hear a car door close and look out the window to see Prue get out of a Porsche. And Piper and Phoebe walk to the front hall to meet up with her. And Phoebe's like, "Wow." And Piper says, "Gee, Prue, looks like being a hired killer agrees with you." And Prue says she doesn't want to run the risk of anyone seeing her out of uniform. Piper says that they've been worried, and she said she didn't want to jeopardize her cover. Phoebe says, "Nice cover." And Piper says, "A nice Porsche, a gift from Bane." And Prue says, "No, Bane prefers, never mind. Look, I need to get back before they get suspicious. Tell me what you know." Phoebe says that M. Steadwell is safe. And Piper says can't say the same for the kitchen. And Prue asks why she was on the list. And Phoebe says could be because she's a witch. I mean, not a magical witch, but a witch practitioner nonetheless. Prue says, "I wonder if all the names were witches, how many were on the list." Piper says 11, except that P. Hallowell was only down once. So if you count us individually, 13. And that's when they figure it out. Prue says 13 dead witches by midnight on Friday the 13th. Ring any bells? And Piper says Barbas. So we finally have a name for the demon of fear, but it kind of came out of nowhere. Why do we all of a sudden know his name is Barbas? And then Prue says, it's gotta be. Phoebe says, it can't be. We 86'd him already. Prue says he must have found a loophole and that she's going to go back to Bane and try to get Barbas to come out. Piper tells her she can't go back there. Prue tells her it's almost 8, so she needs to act fast or Bane will want their bodies. Phoebe tells her to have fun, and Prue says, I'm working. Phoebe says, more like working it. Come on, Prue. I've taken a walk on the dark side. I know all the signs. Prue says, okay, so it's a little different. And Phoebe says, and dangerous. Prue says that she can handle it. And Piper reminds her that Barbas can paralyze her with her greatest fear. She says, how? I already conquered my fear of drowning. What else can he do? And Phoebe says, maybe tap into some other fear. You can't defeat him alone, Prue. She says, I know that, but for now, I'll be okay. I'll call you guys and check in an hour. And she leaves, and Piper and Phoebe just kind of look at each other.
So here we go again with Prue kind of making these decisions despite her sister's opinions and fears. So I'm starting to pick up on more what you were talking about. But I love that we finally got Barbas's name and that they kind of figured everything out. It worked, it didn't feel like it didn't feel like they took a big leap to get there. Like they've dealt with this before. They know it's Barbas's thing, so
Exactly, yeah.
makes sense. That's weird though that they never named him and
I know, because
just
last
suddenly
episode
thought of
he
it.
never had a name, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, it's Barbas, and we're like, Barbas has a name? Okay.
Yeah. Yes, that's him.
Also, like, I mean, Marcy in this scene, so friggin' annoying. Like, if she was at my house, I would be like, I don't even want to protect you anymore.
Yeah. Like such a horrible house guest. Like just because you're a witch and that's like your whole personality doesn't mean you have to act like that,
Mm-hmm.
Like that has nothing to do with you being this super rude, annoying person, Like
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense to me.
But I guess it's to add a little conflict to the episode.
I guess, but I just can't stand her.
Yeah, no, she's awful. Like,
I'd be pissed. So now we are at the Reptile Room bar, and this place is packed. People are dancing and everything. Prue walks in looking sexy as hell in a leather crop top and a fur jacket, and Bane looks over and turns and looks at her as they walk up to each other. And she takes off her jacket, and he says, you look like you're ready to celebrate. Are the Hallowells dead? She says, the night's young. We have a little bit of business to discuss. And he leans in closer to her, and he goes, all work and no play. She's like, we'll play right after I get my money. He says, you'll get your money. You'll get paid when they're dead. And then she says, the boss has a nasty little habit of disappearing in the middle of the night. I'd hate for my money to disappear with him. Can I trust you? And Barbas? And he says, I'm disappointed you doubt either one of us. She says she wants to talk to him, and he's like, well, like you said, the night is young. And then he leads her onto the dance floor, and they start dancing together, all smiley, and they start making out. Like, okay. All right. And then DJ walks up to them, and Bane says, DJ, what's your problem? And he's like, I need to talk to you. He says, it better be life and death, excuse me. And he kisses her hand and then goes, and she starts dancing with this other guy. And then over by the bar, DJ and Bane are talking, but looking back at Prue, and Bane says, make it fast. He says, I just got back from the morgue, and tells him that Marcy Steadwell isn't dead. The real Miss Hellfire is. And him and Prue are making eye contact as she dances with the other guy, and Bane says, I don't believe it. And he says, well, Barbas believes it. And then he looks at Prue and then at DJ.
So, oh my god, this scene between them, like the chemistry is so crazy between these two. Like I'm just like, yes, 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 the whole time.
Oh yeah, absolutely loving it.
And like Prue really plays this role like so well. Like the outfits, the attitude, like everything. Like I'm just obsessed with her all throughout the episode.
She's doing so freaking amazing. Absolutely killing it. And really getting into the part. I mean, she's acting full on bad bitch here. Like,
yes.
And she's like,
and part
fuck
of
it,
me is like,
kinda...
she's not playing, because even I didn't bring it up last scene, But when she's like, oh, like Bane prefers, like part of her does like him. You can
Yeah.
tell.
Oh yeah, and the way she was smiling at him and dancing with him, like this is supposed to be a guy that you're against right now, you know? And she's like really interested, and you can tell, you know, there's actual chemistry between them. So, love
Yeah,
it.
definitely.
But then of
And I
course
mean,
it's all ruined now that he knows.
exactly. The jig is up, and I'm excited to see what happens next.
Me too.
So then we're back at the manor, and Piper's making a phone call as Marcy walks in with Phoebe chasing after her. And Marcy's like saging the room and chanting and just being super annoying. Piper freezes her, and Phoebe's like, oh, who knew Perky could be so annoying? Piper's like, how long do you think I can keep her like this? And Phoebe's like, your power, your call. She says that she hasn't gotten in touch with Prue and that she should have checked in by now. That's when the doorbell rings and Phoebe says maybe that's her. And Piper's like ringing the bell. And Phoebe's like, well, maybe she lost her keys. And Marcy is still frozen next to her. And Phoebe's kind of like, right, Marcy, like joking around. And then Piper rolls her eyes and goes to get the door. It's Dan, and he brought like a big piece of wood for the windows. He's like, I wanted to bring this over and leave it for the crew. They're having trouble finding enough plywood. Then Phoebe comes over and they say hi to each other. And Phoebe's like, don't forget about the. And Piper's like, mm hmm. And Dan is like, is this not a good time? And Piper says, never. I mean, always. Why don't you come in? Come on back. Here, let me help you. And she kind of lifts the wood up high to cover his face. And Dan's kind of like, oh, I got it. But it's blocking his view of Marcy, who we see that Phoebe just threw like a blanket over. And then once they pass by, Phoebe uncovers her and she unfreezes and continues her song. Then Phoebe tells her that there are rooms upstairs that need protecting, and Marcy asks where Piper went, but Phoebe says that she cast a little spell, and Marcy just kind of accepts this, and then they go upstairs.
Oh my god, I can't wait for this bitch to be gone.
I know. She's so annoying.
I can't stand her.
I mean, she's just there for comedic effect, let's be real.
Yeah. Which is funny though.
And like kind of this idea
Phoebe
that, oh
throwing
my
the
god,
blanket.
like, is Dan gonna catch them? Like,
Yeah.
adding that element to it as well.
Kind of the slight fear behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
So now in the conservatory, they put the plywood down by the windows, and Dan's like, so how you doing? And she says, fine, it wasn't that heavy. And he's like, no, I'm talking about everything. And she's like, no, I'm fine with that too. Actually, a little stressed, but everything's gonna be okay. And he's like, so have you thought any more about my offer? And she looks down, and he's like, I don't want to push you. And she's like, I know, it's just every time I think I have things figured out, things tend to shift. He's like, well, what things? And she looks down again, and he's like, hey, you just let me know when you're ready. And he smiles at her, and they kiss. And then he kisses her forehead and hugs her, and he leaves, and she watches and looks pretty sad.
Yeah. So I just want to say that like Dan is literally the most understanding person in the universe. Like he always makes these little pushes and then is like, you know what? Like it's fine. It's all good.
Yeah, let me back off. Which I just don't get it. Like why doesn't he exist in real life?
And it's like it's kind of one of those things where I got him being that way at the beginning, but like at this point, I mean, Piper's your girlfriend. You should feel like you could talk to her about things. But I
Right.
also see the way like she kind of like shuts down in those moments, so I get where his reaction is coming from at the same time.
Yeah, I totally understand his kind of nervousness about it and not wanting to push it, but at the same time, the longer you're with somebody, you would think like you got to have conversations about kind of opening it up. But
And
also, if
that's
you're
the
not even
thing.
comfortable enough to fully talk to her about things yet, then I mean, why are
You're
you
probably not
ready to
ready to
move
live
in? Yeah,
together. Yeah.
exactly.
Like their communication is just not there at this point.
No. And as much as like it's very nice, you could see the rift there and the difficulty in their relationship. So it's kind of again back to that question of does the show want us to want them together?
Exactly. Yeah.
Which I'm seeing like with all the little difficulties they're presenting, as much as Dan is a great guy, kind of seems like it's headed in the direction like it's not working so well because Piper's having a really hard time when it comes to the secret,
Exactly. And I think it's also bringing that idea, like, just because someone is amazing, just because they are this like perfect person, it doesn't always mean that the relationship is going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is an interesting concept. And I do wonder, like, can they fix these problems? Can she tell him the truth? Can they ever be honest with each other? And what would happen if we get to that point?
Me too.
So then we're back inside Bane's office, and Bane and Prue walk in, and she's like, it's not midnight yet. We still have time, lots of time. And now he's angry. He's like, you think you can fool me, get away with it? You killed the woman I loved. And she's like, what are you talking about? He says, you killed Hellfire. She says, I am Hellfire. He calls her a liar. And then he pushes her. Don't like this switch up, Bane.
Yeah.
And Barbas appears right there. And he says, so very nice to see you again, Miss Hallowell. And Bane says, Hallowell from the list. And Barbas wipes his hand over her face. He says, well, 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 can't say that I'm surprised. Your greatest fear is that someone will kill your sisters. She says, no. And her eyes close. He says, oh, yes. The demons are after them, even as we speak. They have assumed your sisters' identities in order to kill them. But you must kill the imposters first by midnight. And then her eyes open and she says, kill the imposters. And Bane says, then I get to deal with her. And Barbas looks at him and then like strokes his hand on Prue's face.
Ooh,
I feel like
intense.
Barbas is the only person who could stroke someone's face as that. And it's not like sexual or weird. Like it just feels natural coming from him, which is so like interesting.
Yeah, like anytime Rex did things like that, it felt so icky.
Exactly.
But Barbas, it feels like it just flows with his character, like we said before.
He's just not a predator in that way. So like I don't look at things he does as like creepy.
Yeah. Which is so weird for us to say. I mean, at the same time, I'm trying to think about this like rationally, I mean, obviously we know the show, so we've kind of already have our own formed opinions, but as a new viewer, I wonder what they think of Barbas.
Yeah.
How he comes across to them. So it's just something I was wondering. But I guess we'll never know.
Because I always go into it like every time there's an episode that he's in, like in season 1, season 2, I'm like, oh, Barbas is here.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm wondering, like you said, what new viewers think of him and kind of how they feel at his second appearance here, if they're as excited as we are.
I know, yeah. I was wondering the same thing. Aside from that, I didn't like Bane's little shove. Okay, like let's calm down here, Bane. We had a good thing going.
I know.
And you're kind of wrecking it.
Like I liked you so much, and now you're just pushing her. And
just because you're mad.
I know, literally.
I mean, I guess in his mind, you killed the woman that I loved, but I mean, come on, Bane.
Yeah, and it does kind of bring up that thing, right? Because we're like, oh, look at all these sweet things he's doing for her, and then all of a sudden he switches up in this scene. I'm like, ooh, I don't like that.
Yeah, you definitely can see his dark side.
Because there are men like that, right? Like they'll do all these nice things for you. And I mean, not just men, but like abusive personalities in general. Like they'll do all these nice things for you, and then you do one thing to upset them, and that switch is there. And it's just, it's realistic, but it makes me less drawn to him and to what we've been establishing between the two of them.
Exactly. Me too.
Prue's new greatest fear, it makes sense. It connects back to Phoebe's from season 1, right? That fear of losing each other is so strong in all of them. So I totally get that. I totally buy that being her new greatest fear.
Yeah. Anything else there?
No, I'm just really excited to see what happens next now that he's convinced Prue that her sisters are imposters, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm excited to see how this plays out. So, now back at the manor, the doorbell rings and Phoebe answers it, and it's Darryl. She invites him in and she says, thanks for coming so fast. We need you to babysit. And then he asks, is this one breathing? And she's like, yes, this one's breathing. And he's like, good, where are you headed? She says to find Prue. She's impersonating the hit woman. It's a long story and you wouldn't like it, but she was supposed to check in by now. And then he says that he's coming with her, and she's like, no, you can't. I appreciate it, but you can't come with us, Darryl. And he says, you don't have to hide anything from me anymore. She's like, I know that, Darryl, but believe me, you don't want to be anywhere near us right now. And we would never forgive ourselves if anything happened to you. And he was like, what, wind up like Andy? And she's like, we won't let that happen. And then we hear Marcy from the next room talking about cleansing the aura of the house. And she and Piper are coming down the stairs, and Darryl tells Marcy she needs to come with him. And she says, oh, is this about the explosion at my shop? And he's like, yes, until we close the case, you'd be safer with me. And then she's like, oh, I think you have that backwards, Inspector. You see, the protection spell I cast has been doing such a bang-up job for these girls. Just think what it could do for you. And then Darryl looks at Piper, and Phoebe is like, okay, well, we thank you for that protection spell. And she walks her and Darryl to the door, and they leave. Now it's Darryl's problem.
Exactly. But
And Marcy
this
being
is
a little flirty to Darryl.
yes, I know. That's why it's like maybe she was just wondering if Dan was single.
Yeah.
She's looking for a boyfriend this whole episode.
Yeah, seriously. Jesus. What were you gonna say though?
But so this is kind of the scene I was talking about with Darryl, where we kind of, he's like, you don't have to hide things from me. And of course, that fear about him winding up like Andy does come up. And this makes me really interested to see how their relationship is going to continue. Because I think he doesn't want to know the background, right? Like, he doesn't want to hear all the details, but he does want to be involved. He does want to help. So I think that's a really interesting kind of like border that he's playing on there.
Right. He wants to be there to help them, but like you said, he's got all of the fears like he had said before, and on top of the fear of ending up like Andy did,
Yeah.
Because now he knows, like, obviously it was because Andy got involved in this too
Mm-hmm.
and kind of went down the same path. So it also makes you wonder if something like that will happen to Darryl,
Yeah.
and how their relationship continues, like you said. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to seeing that down the line. And thank God Marcy's done for out of our lives.
Yes. Goodbye, Marcy. It was okay knowing you.
Yeah, it was all right.
So then we're back at Hellfire's apartment, and Piper and Phoebe come off the elevator, and they saw that the Porsche was parked out front. And then Prue walks in from the next room, and Piper says that they've been worried. And Prue uses her power, and she throws them both onto the floor. Phoebe moves closer to Piper and says, come on, crazy sister, crazy sister. And they start running out of the room, and Prue's walking towards them, like very slow, not at all fazed by them. And Piper says, what's going on? And Phoebe says, I think you need to freeze her fast. Piper says, good witches don't freeze. And Phoebe says, she doesn't look so good right now. So Prue comes up behind them and says, I won't let you kill my sisters. And then she throws a plate at them and they duck and it hits the wall. They run out onto the patio and they're hiding behind a plant. But then Phoebe needs to sneeze, which gives away their location to Prue. And Phoebe says she doesn't know where her sisters. And Piper says, okay, we got to make her choose. We have to try and convince Astral Prue, make her want to be in two places at once, ready. And so they run in opposite directions and they're both like calling for her and everything. And then Astral Prue appears next to Piper, and Phoebe comes up to where they are. And Phoebe says, Prue, Barbas has brainwashed you. And Prue says, you're going to hurt my sisters. Piper says, Prue, we're your sisters. Listen to me. You gave me the chicken pox. Phoebe says, yeah, and remember, I taught you how to French kiss. And they keep doing it, and then Prue's asking them how they know all this. And Phoebe says, because we're your sisters, Prue. And Prue believes them, and they're about to hug, but then Prue's astral self, like, kind of projects back into her body. Phoebe asks if she's with us, and Prue says, I want Barbas. Piper says, all we have to do is lay low until midnight, and then he'll disappear and go back to wherever the hell it is he came from. She says, no, if he's back early, who knows what rules apply or don't. I don't want to take any chances. Let's go show him what his greatest fear is. And then Phoebe smiles and they both walk down to where Prue is.
So this idea of, I mean, I love this whole scene of like Prue fighting against them and them having to convince her and everything. I am a little confused as to why it had to be her astral self. I mean, I assume it has something to do with like, oh, the inner her, like the real Prue or whatever, what she's, but I don't know. It was kind of like, didn't make sense to me. Like at first, I figured they were gonna have Astral Prue go up there and then like tie down the real Prue so that when she went back in her body, like they had more time. I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, trying to use Astral Prue, I guess it's only because like she's outside of herself. They don't know how it works yet. So they're kind of like, well, if we can distract her for a moment like that, maybe because she's so unused to this new power, she'll be a little bit less strong and they could try to reason with her for a moment.
Yeah, I guess it somewhat makes sense. I mean, it seems like they were just really trying to find a way to include her new power, like incorporated into this episode, which I don't know, it didn't fully work to me, but I guess it wasn't too bad, you know?
Yeah. I also have a question about one of the things. When Phoebe's like, "Oh, I taught you how to French kiss." Isn't Prue like 5 or 6 years older than Phoebe?
Yeah. Also, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean you taught her you're like making out with your sister? Like, what do you mean?
I hope not, because ew. But like, yeah, I don't know what that means either.
Like, I'm gonna need some details here. I'm a little confused. Should
Or
clear
was it
that one
like
up.
one of those things where it's like, oh, like you know how people will be like, oh, kiss your hand to like practice kissing? Was it
Oh my
something
god,
like
yeah, it could have been. Yeah, Prue is also much older than Phoebe. It is a little weird that like
because like, you know, Phoebe and Piper, I'm like, okay, they're like 2 or 3 years apart, maybe, but like Prue is significantly older than Phoebe.
yeah,
So
doesn't
what were
make
you
any
like
sense.
12 and 17? Like I don't understand.
Because we know Prue was making out with like Andy
Like
in
she
high
had a
school and
boyfriend in high
stuff.
school.
Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't really make too much sense. But I mean, whatever, I guess.
But you know, I do like the end of this scene where Prue's kind of like, let's go show him what his greatest fear is. I like that line and I'm excited to see what's gonna happen.
Me as well. So now we are back in Bane's office, and Bane and Barbas are both there waiting. And Barbas says, if she's not back in 1 minute, then I'm going to spend my last 2 minutes killing you. And he says, hey, I didn't come to you, you came to me, remember? And he says, and if you hadn't been blinded by your passion, then I would be minutes away from freedom right now. And that's when the door opens and Prue walks in, and Barbas says, are they dead? And Prue says they're right where they belong. And then Piper and Phoebe walk in, and Barbas is like, kill them. And he goes to pull out, Bane goes to pull out a gun. And then Piper freezes him and Barbas. And Phoebe walks closer to Bane and says, oh, I'm beginning to see your attraction to the dark side. And then Prue says it wasn't just his dark side I was attracted to. Do you think you can just unfreeze him? And Phoebe takes his gun, and Piper gives it a try and does it. And then Phoebe says, looking for this. And he's like, what's going on? And Prue says, witchcraft at its best. And then he goes for something, and Prue throws him into a wall. And then Phoebe and Piper walk over by Prue, and the clock strikes 12 as Barbas unfreezes. And he's like, no, and starts spinning and bursts into flames and smoke. And then Phoebe says, I never get tired of kicking his butt. And Piper and Phoebe hug. Then Prue walks over by Bane, and she says, just something to think about in jail. And he says, it won't be the only thing I think about, I promise, kind of with like a little smile. And she's like, is that a threat? And he says, no, it's a compliment, and smiles at her, and she smiles back. And I'm kind of feeling them again.
I know. I'm like, oh, I'm back in there with this ship. Like,
I
oof.
know, seriously.
These
Like, I'm
one
kind of
episode
getting
love
it.
interests, sometimes they really do it for me, you know?
I know, sometimes it's enough. I don't know. I feel like it felt like a very easy ending, they didn't really have to do anything, just wait till midnight. But I do like the chemistry between Prue and Bane. And of course, Barbas, our boy, is gone again. And I wonder if this will be the last time we see
Yeah, I was
him.
gonna say, until next time, question mark?
Yeah, maybe. The end, question mark, you know, like the movies that have that. Oh my god. Yeah, so not too much to say there. It was a satisfying ending, I think, except that we know that nothing is going to happen anymore with Prue and Bane since he's going to jail.
I know. Like, okay, bye, Bane.
Yeah,
And it was nice having you, and you're so hot. I wish you were staying around longer.
I know. It sucks too because I could have seen kind of the progression of, oh, like making Bane good, blah blah blah, and then Prue and him having like a relationship for at least a little bit throughout the show, but it just kind of seems to, well, I guess I'll get into it once we get to the end, but obviously we know that he's not going to be there, and Jack is kind of what we have left over, so and I don't
Yeah,
know, I'm not feeling the Prue and Jack that hard.
I'm not either. I think there's so much opportunity in this world of good and evil we're playing with for really interesting enemies to lovers storylines. And
Hmm.
I don't feel it with Jack and Prue. Like,
Yeah,
I just don't.
like it's just like a little exciting thing, you know, one of those little flings at best. It comes across like it would be. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's how I feel about them too.
So, but I mean, we'll see what happens with them.
We will. We will. All right. So then we're at the manor and it's the next morning, and Piper and Phoebe are cleaning the new windows. And Phoebe asks if she decided whether to move in with Dan. And Piper says, I have to admit, it's very tempting. Phoebe says, yeah, well, you got to do what you got to do, and you deserve to be happy. And don't worry about us. We'll be fine, especially if I get your room. And Piper says, yeah, you could have my room. That is, if I was moving out. And Phoebe's like real excited by this. She's like, oh, you're not going to move out? Oh, that's so good because you need to be with your sisters a little while longer. And she kind of does like this baby voice that she does sometimes when she's saying it.
Mhm.
And then Piper laughs and she's like, I adore Dan, but it's just way too soon for me to move in with him. There's a few things I need to figure out first. And she sits down on the chair with her as Prue walks in and she's on the phone. And she says, well, just tell Marcy that she can sell the ring and use the money to rebuild the bookstore. Tell her it's a thank you for protecting us. No, Darryl, the ring is not hot. I'll talk to you later. And she hangs up and Phoebe says, so what else did Miss Hellfire get from Bane? And she says diamond necklaces, bracelets, a Salvador Dali. And Piper says, you can't really keep all that stuff, can you? She says, no, it wouldn't be right, but maybe I can find a way to do some good and save my job. And if not, I could always astral project and job hunt twice as fast. And Phoebe says, sure, just rub it in. I would love to be in two places at once. And Prue says, as long as one of those places is fun, I'll be happy. I think I may have learned a few things from Ms. Hellfire. Then the bell rings, and she says, change my routine, shake things up a little bit, and she goes to get the door.
I'm glad Piper's staying. I mean, this whole Dan and her thing is too soon, and it wouldn't really make sense for when they need the demon hunting and kind of there for each other. It works better when the three of them are together. Plus, it's like the whole storyline is the three of them, so it's a little weird. Um,
Exactly. And I like the sisterliness of this scene, especially Phoebe
yeah.
being like, oh, I could move into your room. Like,
Right. Right. It's definitely cute. And it was nice that Phoebe was supportive about it and like gonna let her make her own choice, but was like actually really did want her to stay. Like I thought that was cute too.
yeah, and very realistic. Cause I feel like, sometimes when you're a sibling or like a close friend is going to do something, like you want to support them, even if like you want them to stay with you. So I like that she
Right.
did that.
Me too. And luckily this Hellfire thing gave Prue more of an outlook that she needs to spend less time working and more time having fun. But at the same time, I feel like Prue has this same realization time and time again. I mean,
Because she had it after they went to the future too, and she didn't
yeah,
really
that's what
change all that much.
exactly, and nothing really changed, and she went right back into it, and I don't know, but we'll see if maybe she actually sticks with it.
Yeah, we'll find out.
So now in the doorway, Jack is there, and he comes in and he's like, Prue, it's bad enough that you don't answer your phone, come into the office, or otherwise appear to be doing your job, but now you're going to take me down with you. What do you have to say for yourself? And she says $275,000. And he's like, excuse me? She's like, it's the market value of the anonymous estate donation I've been out acquiring. Their one request is that all the proceeds go to Stop the Violence Foundation. Not bad for a day's worth of work now, is it? And he's like, no, it certainly isn't. And I never doubted you for a moment, partner. She's like, liar. And then he laughs. And Prue's like, let's go celebrate, partner. And they walk out together. So now I guess they're kind of going to be dating. But that is the final scene of the episode.
And I will say, in that final little moment, and maybe it's just because like it kind of mirrors her interactions with Bane a little bit. Like I did actually feel some chemistry between them in this scene, which I don't always feel in their scenes.
Yeah, I felt it, but still, again, more like not like I don't see it as something that will ever go anywhere. I mean, I
No,
guess
it
technically
feels
now
like
that they're
a
hanging out.
yeah, it feels more like a flirty friendship to me than it does a relationship.
Exactly. I mean, maybe my opinion will change now that they're, I assume going to be hanging out or maybe dating, like whatever happens from here. Maybe we'll see some different side of Jack. So, I'm curious to see about that, but right now I'm not feeling too much, It's just like heat. Like it just feels like passion, but not a relationship.
Exactly. I
But
totally agree.
maybe that's what Prue needs right now. Maybe that's what the show wants us to see. Like Prue just needs something fun. With Andy, it was so stressful and it was a lot for her just for look at what happened to him in the end, maybe this is kind of good for her to have something more easygoing and fun.
Yeah, because I think at this point, we can kind of consider Andy the love of her life, right? Whether or
Yeah.
not she'll develop another super serious relationship in the future is to be determined. But where she's at right now, after losing Andy, it might just be that she needs someone who, like you're saying, is fun, who she can have a good time with, who she can feel things for, but not necessarily someone she's going to settle down and spend her life with.
Right, exactly. Okay, so final thoughts on Bane.
I love him.
I know. I think kind of with the ending we saw the better half of him a little more. As much as his dark side showed through too, you could see that it kind of felt like there's some potential for him to be decent.
He's one of those characters where like I wish we got more time to get to know him. Like I feel this way like a lot of the villains I'm like, oh, whatever, having them on for one episode was fine. But he's someone who I wish we had as more than a monster of the week, even though he's not really a monster because he's a human.
Right. I definitely agree. I wish we had a little more time to get to know him and get a better opinion formed,
Yeah. I wish
on
we
him.
had more villains in the show, and maybe we will in the future, that have multi-episode arcs, because I think it's always much more fun to explore a character when we do see them around for more than one episode, so we get more opportunities to judge their good, bad, and in-between sides.
Exactly. All right. Anything else to add about this?
I named this episode in my top 10, I believe, when we were talking about favorite episodes in the series, and it holds up. I love this episode. I've always loved this episode.
It definitely was great. We got Bane, who super sexy. We got Barbas back, Prue getting her new power, Darryl finding out about the secret, and all around just a lot of strong, important things to the show happening in this episode, So I think definitely this is one of the tops. And I never really looked at it as like one of my favorites, like I kind of forget about it sometimes, but every time I end up watching it, I remember how much I love it, It's weird. So very happy we got to talk about this one today.
Me too. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you want to reach out to us or follow us on social media, we're on Instagram and TikTok @rewitched_pod. You can also send us an email to rewitched.pod@gmail.com. And join us back next time for Season 2, Episode 10, Heartbreak City.